Welcome to Taste Buds. I'm Debra Eckerling, goal strategist, writer, and foodie, and today I'm speaking with Rick Nahmias, founder and CEO of Food Forward. Welcome, Rick.
Thanks for having me, Deborah.
So, what is Food Forward?
Food Forward is a nonprofit that's based in Los Angeles, but whose work reaches the entire Southwest region. What we do is recover surplus produce that would go to waste and distribute that to agencies who feed the hungry and inspire others to do the same. We move approximately between 90 and 100 million pounds of fresh produce every year. And that is reaches people who are food insecure completely free of charge. With an LA focus, LA County is the next ring of focus, and then it ripples out to different counties, states, and even tribal lands.
Wow, in food insecurity, I feel like I'm understating it, saying that it is a big deal. It's a big thing. But especially now in Los Angeles with the fires and the repercussions from it, it seems like what you're doing is even more important.
It's hugely important. We're, depending on which statistic you read, either 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 families in California or Los Angeles are food insecure, which is crazy when you consider the affluence of this region. With the fires as well, there's an entirely new ecosystem of people who worked in service, restaurants, domestic help, gardeners, who now have no jobs and who are going to find themselves in need of food assistance as well. We focus specifically on healthy, fresh produce. So nutrition equity is a big part of what we're after in making sure people don't just eat food, but they eat healthy food and they get it with dignity.
Fruit and produce, it's good for you, like all of the you, right?
It's good for all of you. And it's also, unfortunately, one of the places that many food pantries or food banks are challenged by because of the fragility and the ability to hold produce. We work with a team that has over 400 years of cumulative experience and knows how to tell when those strawberries have a day of life in them or 2 weeks of life in them, and know when to accept a donation or decline it. And we work at about an efficiency level where we're able to move that produce from its place of origin to its place of distribution for 7 cents a pound. So it's an incredibly efficient nonprofit. To go up to 1,000 foot level, last year we moved a $200 million amount of produce. So produce valued at $200 million for about $7.8 million in cash. So that's how efficient the organization has become. Years ago, we had the good fortune of being on the cover of the Jewish Journal. And at that point, we were only doing backyard harvesting with volunteers. We've since added farmers market recovery, also with volunteers. But the big kahuna is really wholesale recovery because we're in Los Angeles, which is the nexus of all the produce going out to the rest of the country. And there is so much surplus and otherwise produce that would be wasted. We step in while the produce is still viable. We recover it, we refrigerate it, and then we redistribute it free of charge to, I think last count was about 260 agencies, which again, they could be a mutual aid group, they could be the YMCA, they could be a giant food bank. We work with all size agencies, and again, it's all free of charge.
So you rescue produce and you feed people.
Correct. That's simple. We're kind of the Robin Hoods of produce. That's what people have called us.
Okay.
And we're the largest of what we do in the region and have really become specialists in produce. We did for a very brief moment during COVID deal with the FDA boxes that had some proteins and dairy in it. We've gone back to our model of only fresh produce because it's so healthy and it's also in such short supply. Again, if you're working with food bank boxes, they may give you a fruit cup that's sitting in syrup. They may give you a can of tuna or some peanut butter. What you're not getting is Brussels sprouts or kale or tomatoes or bananas or the things that actually you and I really value when we go to the grocery stores. And people who are now struggling not just with the cost of, let's say, eggs, they're seeing food costs at an all-time high. And, we step in there both in a ongoing assistance, but also when you deal with an emergency like the fires that are happening right now. We are there front and center. We've had multiple distributions where we're working with mutual aid groups. We're dealing with distributions in at the Arboretum with families that are dealing with children who need hand fruit. We worked with the Rams in a major distribution they did. We're able to really kind of parachute in and scale our operations to what is needed at the time.
What inspired this organization?
So Food Forward began in 2009. We're just past our 16th birthday. And basically it was me walking around my neighborhood in the Valley Glen area of the San Fernando Valley. As my dog got older and the walks got slower, I started to notice all this fruit on trees that was going to waste, especially this time of year, which is citrus season. You'd see grapefruits, lemons, um, oranges in particular, and tangerines that were just kind of maybe a few went to someone's office or the family that had the tree. But for the most part, it was going to squirrels, rats, and under car wheels. And I just said, this was 2009 when the Great Recession was happening, right? One of our last big emergencies. And I'm like, wait a minute. If you just got some volunteers and harvested this fruit and then got it over to an agency that could deliver it to people, that's an amazing bridge of supply and demand. Why don't we try this? And we tried it. We worked with a group you probably know called Sova for our
Mhm.
first few harvests. They're about 2 miles from my home. They took the produce and said, great, when's the next delivery? Because what they weren't getting was an abundance of fresh citrus. So we supplied that. Then we started working with Men Poverty in Pacoima. And by the end of that first year, we had 100,000 pounds of hand-picked produce from volunteers that were coming out of the woodwork to do this very unique, very LA-based California vibe activity. By the second year, we had 250,000 pounds. And to put that in scale to where we are today, we move over 250,000 pounds on a slow day at Food Forward now, where before that was an annual allotment. That's what we do in one day on a slow day. So we've scaled now to, again, 90 to 100 million pounds a year. There's about 400 varieties of produce that flow through the organization. And they could go as far as tribal lands in southwestern US if the surplus allows. They reach farm workers, they reach children, they reach immigrants, they reach low-income elderly folks, the LGBT community. One of the things I'm very proud of the organization is the diversity of groups we're able to help. There's basically no need for them to show tax returns or citizenship, but basically if they self-identify to the agencies we work with as in need, they will receive this produce free of charge. That is kind of our bottom line mission and the values we bring to our work.
Amazing. And to see that growth, that must just blow your mind. I mean, it blows mine, right?
It's crazy. I mean, COVID, we tripled in size, to be quite honest. We got a warehouse finally with refrigeration in 2019. Little did we know 6 months later, boom, we would be in this incredible, time, which we hope is a once in a lifetime experience of having to meet the moment. Donors found us, agencies found us, funders thankfully found us because we are funded by donations by foundations and individuals. And we tripled in size from the beginning of the pandemic to where we exited. And now we are maintaining and ticking up to, again, these even larger amounts. It's a unique type of operation. We are a complement to food banks. We're not in competition with them, but we are able to break down 5 truckloads of Brussels sprouts where most food banks will turn those away. We're able to mix pallets of produce and give some agencies like Sova or Mend 3 or 4 pallets of what we call mixed loads. So they're able to make a salad out of it rather than just get those pallets of Brussels sprouts. There's not many agencies or nonprofits that can do that. And again, let alone only be dealing with nutritious produce.
And are th are there other organizations? Because we're, as we said before, we're in Los Angeles. This conversation is based in LA, but it
Right.
is a podcast, so everybody can listen. Are there other organizations like this around the country? Or
There
just
are
one
different
here in LA?
organizations. Well, there's different organizations that plug into the food chain at different places, but as far as one that bridges this urban and rural setting and is able to take large amounts of produce and land them at very specific tentacles that really reach the community in a really impactful way, we're the largest out there.
I am not surprised. And do you take volunteers as well?
Two of our programs are volunteer powered. Again, the backyard harvesting, which I spoke about a couple minutes ago,
Mhm.
is our DNA. Again, we train volunteers right on site, and they can go out for about a 2-hour experience where they're harvesting fresh citrus or apples or pomegranates, depending on the season. And that is a year-round program called Backyard Harvest. And if they want something a little bit more regulated and not about getting, that intimate with a tree, they can do a farmers market recovery program. And we're at about 16 farmers markets in Los Angeles and Ventura counties every single week. They can show up for one session, or they can train to be a Glean team leader and be kind of a once a month captain at these farmers markets. Um, the farmers markets program is beautiful too, because that relies on relationships with local small farmers that have been with us in some cases for over 10 years as donors. And it's a great way to, support the farmers market system and also eradicate food waste. See, what Food Forward does is really a two-sided win-win. We are feeding the hungry with healthy food, but we're also eradicating climate change by eradicating food waste. And it's one of those things that is, I think, front of mind as we see the climate change results as, part of these horrific fires that we had. With food waste, a lot of people don't realize that's one of the top 5 contributors to climate change. So by actually volunteering and feeding people, you're getting 2 benefits from it.
For the farmer's market, are people, like, going there to give out food, or are they going to the farmer's market to rescue food?
You're going to rescue. So what we usually do is tell the people, hey, go do your normal farmer's marketing for yourself. And then
Mhm.
at noon, let's say, you're going to meet your team at this location. They put on their food forward aprons. They distribute boxes to the farmer's market vendors who all know us. And those vendors will say, I need 3 boxes this week. I need 6 boxes. So basically, what they're donating is what they don't sell. So it doesn't get thrown out, and they don't have to spend the fuel to drive it back to their farm 2 or 3 hours from the city. They get a tax deduction at the end of the year for every pound they donate to us because we're a 501(c)(3), and that's another win as well, that the homeowners, but specifically the farmers at the farmers market program, are getting a tax deduction, and that produce is boxed up. It's brought to a central location at the market, and within minutes, agencies, they could be a women's abuse shelter, they could be again a YMCA, they could be a local soup kitchen, will come and pick up their allotment at a designated street corner right there and bring those back to their agency within a mile to 10 miles of that farmer's market and use it however they see fit.
So we're up to, like, 4 or 5 wins here in this
There's 40 here.
win-win
If we
situation,
had time,
right?
if we had time, I would go down the list. I mean, most importantly, at the end of the day, we're seeing folks who are food insecure again across this huge panorama are eating healthy produce they would not get otherwise. But the other wins are volunteers are getting a sense of how they contribute to this virtuous cycle. We're seeing agencies who would otherwise have to buy this produce get it for free. We're seeing lack of waste going into the ozone. And again, I can go on and on, but I think we did enumerate it once, and there's about 40 wins in the equation that Food Forward brings to the table.
And as we were talking about before, and in my intro, I am a goal strategist. I just wrote a book, 52 Secrets for Goal Setting and Goal Getting. And goal getting is really about finding the wins and letting that energy propel you forward. So when we're talking wins, you are completely speaking my language. Wins plus food, I mean, and to multiply it exponentially, where did your love of food come from?
It was deep. I mean, I was raised with certain ethnic foods from the Jewish world that I came out of that to me are front and center in the culture. My grandmother made the only chopped liver I will ever eat, and there's nothing that comes close to it. Um, Her stuffed cabbage was amazing. Her latkes were amazing. And then my mother kind of picked up the mantle. But I actually did a turn in probably in my late 20s, early 30s, where I went to the Culinary Institute of America and was trained as an actual cook. And I would not call myself a chef, but I'd say that I'm a very functional cook. I know my way around a kitchen. I had a very short stint where I had a professional private chefing gig that I did. And I see food as a language. I see it as a canvas. And my work with Food Forward followed a career as a documentary photographer. And one of the seminal projects I worked on was around migrant farm workers. And what I did is I spent about 2 years documenting the human cost of feeding the country by following the stories of migrant farm workers, and became really aware of what it takes to feed this country. As California, supplies upwards of 50% of the produce that gets out into the rest of the country. When you saw the conditions and you saw the lives and the dedication and the challenges that migrant farm workers face, it put a whole new value on what food is. My work as a chef and the food waste elements and how much food is thrown out put another layer of appreciation. And then living in Los Angeles, there is an abundance in Los Angeles of so much of a desire to make change, but also about money and food, that I felt sharing abundance was really the heartbeat of Food Forward and has remained that. So I don't talk about a glass half full or a glass is half empty when I talk about Food Forward. I come at it from a glass is overflowing. How do we share that? How do we give it away? Food should be gifted. It should not be a commodity or a transactional type of thing of I give you this, you give me that. And when you have stuff growing on trees and nature has given us this abundance in this incredible region, it's our duty to share that. And it's something that, again, if you wanted to trace back from a Jewish perspective biblically to the book of Ruth, where gleaning and farmers giving produce out of their fields to those who were less fortunate, it goes back millennia. In this case, it was really an inspiration, not biblically for me, but really about how do we embrace our community and how do we become more self-sustaining with trees that are already established, with produce that's already coming out of the field in greater surplus than we can use. Let's give it away. Let's find a way to be respectful of these resources that are given us by nature and pass them along to folks who are having a tougher time.
The generosity of spirit is definitely also speaking my language because we're all in this together. And I think when we remember that,
Yeah.
we do better.
Absolutely. And it's abstract at times to people, but I think the truth is whether you're giving money to a cause, you're giving time to volunteering, you're giving your love to a situation that needs it, just share it. Just give it away. Let's realize it's something that we all can do no matter what walk of life and no matter what your economic ability is. We all have something to share. In our case, our currency is fresh produce, and that's how we share love, is through giving it away.
There are emotional benefits too to produce, aren't there?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, there's emotional, nutritional, there's just so many studies that prove what you need to do as far as how much produce you should be taking in for nutritional and I think mental well-being. And last we measured, we were on a given day supplying the USDA recommended nutritional portions for over 300,000 people a day at Food Forward. So it's bringing a lot of love, it's bringing a lot of joy, but really it's bringing a lot of nutrition to folks who are otherwise being challenged.
And especially in these challenging times that we live in, where it feels like the weight of the world. I mean, we'll talk. We've got fires. There was just the plane crash. You're not safe anywhere in the world, right? But you need to take care of yourself so you can function, so you can do whatever it is that you do. You need to be able to function, and to function, you need food, but to function well, you need nutritious. Did I get it
Absolutely.
right?
You couldn't have said it better.
What are people who, whether they are here or not, what are simple things that they can do to make the world better for others?
Well, I mean, I think you start with looking at what you have to give. There was an amazing outpouring of energy a few weeks ago when the fires started here. And I noted people were showing up to volunteer left and right. And where that's great, I equate that to that surge of volunteerism we see right before Thanksgiving and Christmas. We need that energy throughout the year. We need it in February. We need it in April. We need it in July. And I will tell you that this incredible catastrophe that's just fallen upon our city is going to be months and years in the rebuild. And I think people really, really owe it to themselves to say, how do I show up for this city and for my community in the months and years ahead? And I know Food Forward will be there because we've been there for 15 years and we are intricately involved in the nutritional, well-being of the city. But as individuals, I think just coming at it first is what do I have to share? And in some cases, people went into their closets and they found a winter coat or a blanket or something to share. And I think that's great. The question is, what's the next layer of what I share? How do I show up for these folks who are, they're now running the gauntlet of insurance and building codes and unemployment and all those things, and give it a thought beyond that first blush of desire and come back to it a few weeks later and say, what is needed? Where can I help out in the fourth week and the fourth month of this crisis? Because I'll tell you right now, I've got a friend's car in my driveway whose home burnt to the ground and they fled to Portland to just recompose themselves. And I keep putting myself in their shoes and thinking, what do they need from me? What is it that they can use to try and rebuild a life that was 70 years in the making and that is no more? And part of it is just showing up and being present.
The other point that you bring up, and you're right, and it's almost like it's when someone's in mourning, you do the shiva and there are people around, and then that doesn't go away either. You need people need ongoing support, and I feel like that's a really appropriate analogy. The other point, that you made is to be there to show up for people and think about what you can give. They've got enough to do. Don't ask them. I mean, if they offer and say, "I need this," great, but think from the perspective of what you can give rather than giving them a task of figuring out what you can give them.
Yeah. And I think also leaning into organizations, and LA has many of them that do really great work that showed up for this. In our case, we have a number of volunteer opportunities. You can find them at foodforward.org. Obviously, donating money helps us go a long way at 7 cents a pound. It's a huge, bang for your buck as far as nonprofits go. But there's animal shelters where displaced animals need some love and support while they're waiting for their parents to reclaim them. Any number of things. It's not just bringing like bags of your old clothes to a location, but how do you as a human being show up and be part of this effort? And I really recommend that people, there's a great website called laworks.org, and they help match volunteers with opportunities. And thinking long term of what your passion is, and again, how you can do something that is got longevity, because you will be fed spiritually from the opportunity of volunteering and being part of this rather than, just showing up that one time, checking that box and moving on. There's no question we were all hit with a sense of trauma that I think will have months of rippling out. But the question is like, how do we embrace the community as a whole and begin to heal?
Absolutely. And the other point, whether you were directly impacted by the fires, if you live here, you were impacted by the fires.
Yes.
And when you feed others, metaphorically or literally, you are feeding your own spirit.
I couldn't say it better. There is
You just said it. No, it's exactly what you said.
there's a symbolism with food that is not, it's not pedantic. It's actually realistic. When you feed others, there's a spiritual. I mean, you talk about feeding. We talk about it in terms of the literal, but metaphoric as well. And I think right now feeding people continues to feel like an urgent call. And I feel really privileged to lead an organization that does just that, and that really understands that it's not just about the act of feeding, but it's again going back to the act of sharing what we all have.
Well, it has been lovely spending time with you today. Do you have any final food for thought?
Well, I'm leaving you with a recipe of my grandmother's stuffed cabbage, which was the moment that opportunity to share that was granted. I was like, I knew exactly what I wanted to give because it's I lean a lot more towards plant-based eating now, but that's like one of those recipes I can't not take part in. And I made it recently for a Christmas event, and it was so wonderful. I brought it to this large gathering of people of all cultures and backgrounds, and we put it out, and I think it was about not even 3 minutes that the casserole dish was completely empty. And I just, I'm happy to share that with folks. It is a very authentic, Ashkenazic recipe that goes back many decades in my family. And I hope people give it a try. It's super simple and it's really rewarding to sit and roll cabbage. And, it's a nice braise. So you put it in the oven and the house will fill with the smells. And it's one again that's always better the next day. And so I will leave you with that recipe. And again, just deep gratitude for having me on the podcast. And folks that want to learn more about Food Forward, to hit us up at foodforward.org, whether it's again volunteering or making a donation. We love to hear from you.
I love how you even answered my last question about where can people find you without me asking. Thank you so much for taking the time to share Food Forward and also your recipe, which you can get along with the article at jewishjournal.com/podcast.
What's nice is the recipe makes a tray and a half. Again, whether you're doing like a, a normal Pyrex, I always make one that I'm bringing to an event, and then it's like another half tray that exactly for yourself later that week.
Amazing. I love that this recipe is designed for sharing.
Absolutely. And a
And
little bit of selfish kind of, feed yourself the next day.
awesome. Well, thanks again, Rick, for your time. Thank you for tuning in to Taste Buds with Deb. Don't miss an episode. You can subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or your favorite podcast platform. And again, go to jewishjournal.com/podcast to read the articles and get the recipes that go with each episode. And you can learn more at tastebudswithdeb.com. Go eat food, share food, feed, be fed. Until next time, bon appetit.